In this video, basically we are going to deploy all of our oscillators and our waves and our I think indicators and DBSI. We are going to deploy all of them to determine the overall direction. Like I was saying, we touch on each varieties and how their functions work, and now we are going to deal with all of them. So basically this whole video is going to be an entire overview of using all the different varieties of, again, oscillators or waves and indicators and DBSIs to determine the overall direction. And we're going to use time frame as a way of screening our environment. Like I said earlier on, we have to know the environment pertaining to the assets that you're trying to trade, and we're going to determine the overall direction. And since trading is all about direction, we will trade in accordance with the very direction of our oscillators or waves. So basically, if this video is going to be a little bit lengthy, but bear with me, it's going to be interesting because we are going to use relatable words that will simplify our whole understanding of trading. So before we start, let me on all these oscillators and all these other elements that helps in our trading. So we have our light blue line, like we talked earlier on, and we have our blue wave, and we have our VWAP, and we have our money flow, and we have our buy, and we have our blue wave crossing up, blue wave crossing down. Zero line is already on. We have our 100% line. We have the overbought one. We have the oversold. We have the trigger waves. Trigger 1, trigger 2. We have the RSIs, and we have the stochastics. And I think we're done for it. So basically, we've already set all our oscillators or waves, and like I said, these oscillators and waves, they move. When I say movement, they move in accordance with time. So on each time frame, these oscillators move like I expressed earlier on under the time frames, and this time we are trying to determine the overall direction combining these elements. So I will really want to use relatable words that can simplify our understand. So this is how I see trading. Basically, this isn't based on any other script. This is a Market Cipher script, by the way. So this is how I see the direction. The direction is, where are we heading towards? Are we going up or are we going down? Like I said, trading has always been a direction. And are we going to the positive territories, or are we heading towards the negative territories? And since we have different variety of oscillators and waves having different functional abilities, how do we determine the direction? That's what we did the earlier on time frames, that we use time frames to determine the direction, because oscillators move in time. And since we know about our direction, let's use these oscillators to determine whether we are in the positive territories or we are in the negative territories. So this is how I'm going to describe. I see trading as, let's say you are traveling and you're using a vehicle, and this vehicle has different functional abilities. It has, let me say, every vehicle has an engine. So this is how I'm going to describe my momentum waves. These are my engine. The blue, this blue, light blue, and the deep blue is basically my engine, and my VWAP is my table. You understand? This is my table. This is the yellow line that we talked about earlier on, and my money flow is my liquid. Money flow is my liquid, meaning it's my gas or my fuel. And I'm trying to travel with a vehicle, and in traveling, this is more or less like my vehicle and every different element I have with my traveling. So I have my engine checked, I have my table on, and I have my liquid, meaning my vehicle can move. So right now, if I want to determine the direction of my vehicle, I have to look at where all these oscillators or all these elements or varieties of oscillators are heading towards. If all of my oscillators seems to be heading towards the positives, it means I can long. If all of them are heading towards the negative, it means I can short. But what if we have different movements in terms of direction? If we have the VWAP, which is my table, heading down, and I have my money flow heading down, and let's say I have my momentum heading up, it means there is more or less like a distortion in direction. Most times, if you want to trade perfectly, you have to use your engine because it's the most influential oscillator or wave. It has direct impact on price. Look at the direction of your engine first. You look at the direction of your money flow first. Sorry, the momentum first, because momentum more or less like has enough or impact on price. We are going to deal with other terminologies as well, which is anchor waves and trigger waves using the momentum waves. But you see, like I was saying, I want to simplify it first, then we deal with the anchor waves and the trigger waves, because again, trading is all about direction, but sometimes you have to also understand the technical directions and other elements of it. So basically, if I want to determine the overall direction, I have to first of all, let me take out all these drawings. I have to first of all, like we did earlier on in time frames, I have to set my vertical line here, and I'm on a forward time frame. And right now, I could see my momentum seems to be heading towards upward right now. We are heading towards the upward territories on the 4 hour time frame, because again, like I said, momentum plays a very has a very major impact on price, and we have to determine the direction first. Like I said, I have another different jargon that I don't want to use right now because I really don't want to bore you with different words. We call it the anchor and the trigger waves. We could see there is an anchor wave forming. Mostly the anchor waves are the bigger waves that when it crosses below this line, it means we've bottomed and we are trying to head towards upwards, and we form a smaller wave, which is the trigger wave, and we are heading towards the upward territory. So you could see money flow is trying, also let me say the liquid is trying also to head towards upwards, and we realize that VWAP is already in the or the table is already in the positive region. So it's like we have two oscillators or two influential oscillators heading towards the positives. But again, how would we know that we are heading towards the positives? So we go to the next time frame, which is the lower time frame. Like I said, the lower the time frame, the more the steps or the more the movements, and the higher the time frame, the less the steps, because higher time frames are more or less like summarized because you have smaller movements, and lower time frames are more or less expanded. So we are now heading towards the positive territories, and let's see how the momentum or other oscillators move on the lower time frame. So on the 3 hour time frame, you could realize that again money flow seems to be heading towards the upwards. Now we realize the momentum of our engine is in the positives. You could realize that we entered the positives, and VWAP is still in the positives. So we have like two positives and one upcoming negative, probably heading towards the positive. So it's like we have two positives and one negative, but it looks like it heading towards the positive. So let's see the overall movement of our liquid. Liquid is the red one. Let's see if it enters the positive territory. So again, we go to the next time frame, which is the 2 hour time frame, to see the overall direction. Then I realize that again we try heading towards the negatives, the positive, sorry, using the liquid, but we couldn't. We haven't yet entered the positive yet. Sorry, because we're still struggling. You could see that the liquid is still struggling beneath the zero line. We are still in the negative. So we still have two positives. Still we have two oscillators or different waves in the positives, and we have one influential oscillator in the negative. Again, this is just another fragment of our data using time frames. So let's go to the next time frame, which is the hourly time frame. Then you can realize that money flow is still in the negatives, right? And you realize that momentum waves registered a red dot here, and momentum wave seems to be heading towards the negative. It seems to, but again, how do we know the overall direction? How do we know the overall direction? VWAP came back into the negative, so it's like we're still in the negatives and we're still in the positives a little bit, but it's still not. We haven't still already determined the overall direction, because we're still battling as to whether are we in the positives more or are we in the negatives more. And let's go to the next time frame and see the 45 minutes to see the overall direction. Then you can realize the momentum is heading towards down. Like I said, your engine seems to be coming down, and your VWAP is in the negatives and the money flow is in the negatives. So it's like we have so much negatives movement than the positives. There's like you can't really determine whether we are fully in the positives, because it seems that the negative movements is outweighing the positives. And let's go to the next time frame, which is the 30 minutes time frame. Then you can realize that momentum came down very bad, and we registered a green dot, which is more or less like I said, a bullish signal, but again, it's not enough, and we head upwards, and momentum also registered another red dot. Money flow is still struggling. Our liquid is still struggling in negatives, and VWAP as well entered the negatives again. So it's like the more we scan our environment, we have so much negatives than the positives. It's like there is no enough positive movements, or there is no enough positive territories that we are heading towards. It's more or less like a negative territory. So it's like majority of our oscillators or waves are in the negatives much more than the positives. How do we scan through the time frames and we have so much movement in the positive, then we can know we can buy. But it seems to me that most of our oscillators, according to the time frames, are in the negative. Let's go to the 50 minutes for enough time frame, or for enough data. So when we head towards the negatives, well, it seems we are in the liquid is in the positive, but again, this is a lower time frame, so we have more movement than higher time frames. But VWAP still came back in the negatives, and you could realize that the money flow seems to be heading downwards because it has struggled so much in the negatives, and even though it went into the positive, the direction seems to see it's coming downwards. And momentum wave registered a red dot, which is a bearish signal. Our engine registered a red dot, which is a bearish signal. So it seems it will also head towards the negative. So it's like the direction of all of these oscillators seems to be in the negatives more than the positives. And again, when we went to the different time frame, when we went to the 5 minute time frame, you realize that the momentum waves were heading towards the downward territories. The liquid was heading towards the downward territories, and the VWAP is in the downward territories. It's like majority, and our RSI seems to be far apart, which represent weakness, right? So you can realize that the overall movement of our oscillators seems to be heading towards the negatives the more. It seems to be heading towards the very negative the more. We have our vehicle, which is our momentum wave, right? And we have our liquid, which is our gas, and we have our table, which is our VWAP. Most of the directions that we scan through multiple time frames seems to be in the negative. Our VWAP has been in negative for so long, our money flow has been in negatives for so long, and our engine or our momentum waves has been in negatives for so long. And it's hard for you to buy, or yeah, of course, buy when you see the overall direction, and it's possible to sell because we are in the negatives the more. So direction has now been determined based on how these oscillators are waves, or these different elements of oscillators have responded to our time frames. Because like I said earlier on, we use time to scan our environment to determine the overall movement. And since these oscillators move in accordance with time, in other words, these oscillators, their movement are around the time that we use. And our overall time frame shows that we are in the negative territories the more. Like I said, we are more in the negative territories than in the positive territories, depending on how you want to scan environments. I start from the higher time frame and I go to the lower time frames to determine the overall direction. Direction means this is where the asset, based on the data that we have pertaining to the given asset, based on what we have, majority of our oscillators seems to be in the negatives. And if you're in the negative, this is not a time to buy. If you're in the negative, this is a time to sell. And if you are in the majority of our oscillators, according to these time frames, are in the positive, this is not a time to sell. It means it's a time to buy. So overall, you can know the direction determines your entries, not signals, like I said. So once we have the direction, we can now also pair it with signals. So you can realize that our signals says different stuff, or probably complements the directions, because we realize that we still, we are overall, we are not bearish, so we are not bullish, but our signal literally shows us that we are still bearish. We saw a bearish signal here on the 4 hour time frame, which is, it affected price as well, and we went down and came down. We saw another black diamond here, we went down, but there's more or less like a slight movement here, but it's not enough for us to trade just because we saw this. I'm not going to trade because I saw this. I have to use main direction to determine I have to use my oscillators to determine the overall direction by scanning through other time frames to see how it responded with that time. And like I said, trading is more or less a directional affair, not necessarily a spot, or sorry, not necessarily indicators and signals. Signals are not enough. The data is not enough, and you can realize that price is still heading towards the negative territories. We are still downwards. Bitcoin is still down, and you realize that the more we scan the time frame, the more we realize that we are in the negative, the more than in the positive. So overall, in order to determine the overall direction of price, we basically have to understand how these oscillators function and how they affect price. And if you can see that most of the movements are in the negative territories based on how you scan the environment using your time frame, it means this is a time to short. If you see most of your oscillators are in the positives, this is a time to long. And you can also pair DBSI as well for enough. Again, these are supplementary algorithms, and you back them up with your oscillators to see the overall direction. These are just an additional the BSI. These are just an additional data that helps you, and it determines your direction overall. You can realize that we are still bearish, and price is still heading towards the territories of our bearish movements. It's like majority of our oscillators are in the negatives much more than the positives. So this is not the time to be buying. This is the time to be shorting. And I could say that trading has always been simplified and has always been easy. Trading with Market Cipher is not really that hard if you give yourself time to understand direction. Like I said, we have other videos that I will probably supplementary videos that will explain what we call the anchor waves and the trigger waves. I didn't want to include in this trading course, especially this one, because most times people get confused and I wanted to treat it separately. So I'll probably deal with the anchor and trigger waves for us to understand how momentum also move, and we're probably going to deal with divergences along the line. And overall, this is by far, to me, I think a simplified trading course, and I think it's for all people. I mean, you can literally have time, and these are short videos, and I know people are busy nowadays, so I really want to keep stuff very lengthy. People get bored easily. I just wanted to use relatable subjects, also relatable words that we can literally relate with in life, and overall we can understand how trading works. You're probably going to have it all in one day. It will take time. Watch the videos, take your time and learn, and also ask yourself questions like, is it enough for me to trade on just a single time frame, or is it enough for me to trade on a single oscillator? It's like you don't have to use a single data to make your judgment. You can use you can use varieties of data to determine your entries. So anytime you're dealing with time frames, your question you have to ask yourself is this time frame enough for me to determine my direction? So I have to scan the environment using multiple. So in order to increase your biases with regards to time frames, you have to increase or probably navigate towards different time frames for the overall bias. In order to increase the biases with your oscillators, you have to use different varieties of oscillators. Like I said, you need enough biases, you need enough different varieties of oscillators or waves, or you need enough varieties of different indicators or signals or road signs to determine your overall direction. Like I said, trading has always been a directional affair. Never has it been about indicators, and it's mostly primarily about oscillators or waves. And once we can establish this premise with Market Cipher, our trading becomes simplified. You don't have to really struggle with determining the direction. We have other different strategies. This is just one of the basic strategies. We have other different strategies where you can swing and scalp. Like I said, we have different videos that talks about it that will come earlier on. But for now, we just want to stick to the very basics. This is a basic course, and it's for all people. It's not for professionals. It's just for all of us who've never traded before. And if we can master how it works with time, we can familiarize ourselves with different strategies on our own. It shouldn't be my strategy per se. You can also bring a strategy. You can do technical analysis with Market Cipher if you choose to, because it's directional, and you can obviously see how price reacts. So you can backtest and realize that price response based on these movements of the oscillators, and you can realize obviously from here price headed towards the downward territories, and the momentum right at the red dot here, and we headed down here. But again, how do I determine the overall direction without literally looking at this single time frame? Basically, you have to look at different time frames to see the overall direction. So like I said, this is going to be a short course, and this is going to be a very short video. Like I said earlier, I don't really want to take much of anybody's time. I just want to keep it simple and make it simple for everyone. So without further much radio, I really probably want to end this course here and end this video, and have a nice time. Be good.